Thank you. Y equals mx plus b, where m equals the slope. And what's the b represent? The y-intercept. So on 1 through 3, we're going to write an equation of the line in slope-intercept form given what they have given us. So these are the pretty easy ones. So if my slope is 3, my y-intercept is -5, I want to write y equals 3x minus 5. I'm just plugging that information in for the m and for the b. Okay, you could put plus -5, but you're going to see it like that right now. Okay, what about number 2? Y equals 2x minus 6. And then number 3. Plus 1/2?
Yeah.
Or 0.5? Okay, so down at the bottom, if we're going to write an equation of a line in slope-intercept form given a table. So that's just like the rate of change we looked at on the very first day. We're going to find our slope. That's the first thing. So find your change in y over your change in x. So looking at that table, it goes from -3 to -1, -1 to 1, 1 to 3, 3 to 5. So what's my change in y each time?
2.
Plus 2, and then what's my change in x? 1. Okay, so that's my slope, that's my m. 2 over 1 or just 2. Anytime you have a whole number, you can write it over 1 if you want it to be a fraction. And when you're given these tables to find your y-intercept, to find the b, if you have the x value of 0 on your table, the corresponding y value is your y-intercept. So the y-intercept on a table is when x equals 0. So for this first table, what's my y-intercept going to be? That 1 value, right? Because that's the corresponding y value to that x. So if I put all that together, y equals 2x plus 1. Okay? What's our change in y? 0.5? Negative 0.5 because it's getting smaller. What's my change in x? 1. So negative 0.5 or negative 1/2 is my slope. Then can I see my y-intercept on this table? Do I have an x value of 0 anywhere on the table?
Yeah,
On x. So then what's the y value with that x, with that 0? 3. So put all that together. Put all that together in y equals mx plus b format. Y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. Okay, next table. Sample 1, change in y over the change in x. So we'll find our slope first. What's our change? What's our change in y? And they may not all be the same, but we'll look at that. What's the difference between 14 and 8? 14 minus 8. What about -1 to positive 8? If you ever are in this situation and they're not all the same, just take one of those pairs. So like I can take the change in y as 6 and the change in x is 2. Because what's that going to reduce down to? 3 over 1. Same thing, what if I chose to take 3 and 9? Say I said my change in y was 9 and my change in x was 3. 3. So I'm still getting the same change. So if you don't see all the same numbers, don't panic. You can still find the same slope. Just put your change in y over change in x. So my slope is 3. And can I see my y-intercept on this table? Is there an x value of 0 I can look at?
Yes, it's
Negative 1. So my b, or my y-intercept, is negative 1. So if we put all that together in an equation, y equals 3x minus 1, right? So remember, the y-intercept is when x equals 0. So for these bottom 3, let's just look and find our y-intercept. So on example 1, ooh, I didn't mean to do that. On example 1, we've got 1 as our y-intercept. On example 2, 3. And then on example 3, negative 1. So just finding your y-intercept. So if we don't have 0 in the table, and it's not that easy to find the y-intercept, use the substitution method. So find the slope m. So for this first table, what is my slope? I go from 11 to 15, 15 to 19, plus 4, and my x-axis is going up by 1. So 4 over 1 is my slope. And to fill that slope in to your y equals mx plus b equation. So we want to use that. So y equals 4x plus b. Step 3, choose an ordered pair, then substitute in the x and the y. So any pair from that table, we can substitute in for x and for y. Does that make sense? So looking at that table, which ordered pair would you want to use? It's up to you. 1 and 11 is probably the easiest because it's the smallest set of numbers. So say I choose 1 and 11. I'm going to plug in the 1 for my x value. And I'm going to plug in the 11 for my y value. And then solve for b like you would solve a one-step equation. That's pretty much what you're left with, is a one-step equation. So 11 equals 4 plus b. So how would you solve that? If this was just a regular one-step equation you found, how would you solve for b? Good. We just want to get rid of that 4. We're trying to figure out what this is. And so what is 11 minus 4?
7.
So you found your y-intercept.
Couldn't you just subtract?
What do you mean? That's all you're doing. After you plug in your x and your y, that's all you're doing. It's just a one-step equation. Okay, on this first table, same thing. What's our change in y over change in x? Your change in y should be 2, right? And your change in x is 1. So if your slope is 2, what's your y-intercept on that very first table? Do we see x equals 0 anywhere? So it'd be negative 4. So for that first table, y equals 2x minus 4. And then look at example 1. So example 1 doesn't have x equals 0, so you're going to have to find your own y-intercept. So first figure out what your change in y is. What is that change in y? 13, or 5 to 13, 13 to 25. What's it increasing by each time?
Technically 4 for each one.
The first one was 8, right? Plus 8. And my change in x was 2. So 8 over 2 or 4 over 1. Okay, so that's my m, or my slope. So I gotta use that y-intercept form. I have to use that equation. So y equals 4x plus b. So I'm going to plug that slope in for my m because I know what it is, but I don't know what my y-intercept is. Now I've got to pick one of those pairs from the table to plug in for x and for y. So which pair would you like to use? 2, 5? Okay, so that means I'm going to plug in 2 for x and 5 for y, and then I've got b left over. So 5 equals 8 plus b. So then how do we solve from here? Think about a one-step equation. How do you solve a one-step equation? Minus 8. So what is my b? I've got my m. What's my b? My slope, my intercept. Negative 3. So put it all together in y equals mx plus b format. Using what we've got. So y equals 4x minus 3. So on these graphs, when we find our y-intercept, it's that b. So that's our starting point. So that's why I put that dot on +1 on the y-axis. And then our slope, since they just gave us a whole number, we can put it over 1. Yes. So I'm going to write that whole number over 1 because that's telling me that that's my rise and that's my run. My vertical change to my horizontal change. So from that +1, I'm going to use that slope and I'm going to go up 2. So I want to go up 2 and over 1 and make my new point. Okay, up 2 and over 1. You can draw a line, maybe better than mine, through those points. So then on example 3, my b, my y-intercept is -2, so on the y-axis, I'm going to find a -2, so that means I'm going to go down 1, 2, and make my first point. So then I can move from there using this slope. So my slope is -2 over 3, so that's a rise over run. And since it's negative, I know my line should look like this eventually. So from that point, I want to go down 2 and over 1, 2, 3. Okay, and I guess I can make another point down there. So I can go down 2 more and over 1, 2, 3. And then draw a line through those points. And you're done. On the homework side, if you get to the homework, skip number 16. Number 16, bonus. Okay, so it's not going to count against you, but if you do it, extra points. And you get it right, extra points.